Hello and welcome to our next episode of Minerva PLM TV. I'm Jennifer Moore, your host, and please welcome today Brian Smith, Growth and Transformation Consultant at TCS. Brian, thank you so much for joining today.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for inviting me in. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. So Brian, of course, I understand you've been in the PLM space for quite some time now. For those that don't know you, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and what you're doing now?
Yeah, so a quick run through my history. I started off, did mechanical engineering at university over 20 years ago now. It feels like it's time's flown. And then did a postgrad in computer-aided engineering. And then went into industry, so started off in the UK automotive sector within one of the engineering IT organisations, looking at sort of what was the very early days of PDM and the exchange of information between different systems. So Metaphase was one of the tools back in the day, so shows how far back it is. Did that for a few years and then went into the UK defence sector, following a similar type of sort of job role where I was part of, again, engineering IT, but looking at PDM and how it could best be used to support the business processes, and how when they'd done the transition from 2D CAD to 3D CAD, how were the business processes all working. Mm-hmm. And during that, got quite involved in the collaboration between the different sites on programs. So there'd be 3 or 4 sites across the UK, all sharing the same CAD models, and it was how they could collaborate and work together. So I think on the outcome from that, I ended up getting pushed towards the configuration management space. And it was, can you go implement configuration management in this PDM system? And that probably took me about 1.5 to 2 years to get something in place, but became more interested in the configuration management side and jumped actually into the business to start working in configuration management for a number of years. And doing that, you can never escape the tool sets because you were having to use them day in, day out, but it was a case of moving on to the other side to be the end customer. And you were then seeing it from the other side of the fence. Went to work with one of the big SI organizations for a few years, doing consultancy around configuration management, but kept getting dragged back into the PDM space during that time as well. So I always seemed to have a foot in each camp. After a few years there, went back into a defense organization running their CM team, again, looking at enterprise configuration management. And they were very much into trying to adopt the CM2 philosophy, mm-hmm. principles behind that. So very much closed loop change processes. Went from one organization into another one because they were setting about trying to transform their CM function to be more CM2 orientated. Did that for a couple of years, and then they started to bring in new ERP systems and wanted to bring in PLM. And then a lot of fun then started because they brought ERP in first. And then it was a case of trying to manage product information in a combination of Excel spreadsheets, SharePoint, and an ERP system, mm-hmm. which was never easy. So we had a lot of process improvement work we had to work through constantly until we finally managed to get a PLM initiative up and running. And I think that's when I first came into contact with some of the guys at Minerva. So that's probably about 6 years ago now. And I took that PLM initiative through the initial requirements capture and the process analysis. So where were the benefits that PLM could bring, through the tool selection and the business case, and then actually implemented it. And we took an agile approach. So it was probably a bit more than an MVP, an initial platform that was able to give us a good foundation that we could then start building on top of. And then what started off as a phase 1 with that initial platform gradually got bigger, and the phase 2 became bigger than phase 1 itself. So I suppose the key drive there was if you can be seen to be delivering business benefits, you'll be encouraged to then carry on.
That's great.
And that's what happened. And then 2 years ago now, I moved across into TCS. And in some ways, within the growth and transformation group, or it used to be innovation transformation, it's very much the same. It's very much use the business, the process data, and a lot of your metrics to identify where's the problems, where's the areas of opportunity for improvement, and then how can technology best be used to fix some of those business processes and drive value back in. So that's a quick run through of the last 20 years.
Trying to distill it down to just a few minutes is always difficult, but
yes.
One of the things that I find particularly interesting about your background is that no matter what you've done or what your specific role in the company was at the time, one thing has remained constant, and that's this idea of continuous process improvement.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you think about the different places that you've done that work and continuing to do it now, in this era of digital transformation, how do you really start a process improvement program? And work out to building those value stream maps and figuring out which direction you should be going with the technology that's ultimately going to support your new programs and your people.
So I suppose one of the areas that tends to get picked up a lot is people look at the business problems that are coming through from KPIs that have been reported at senior management level. It could be they've been having delays on programs or having quality issues. Again, all of that ties back into your normal business KPIs. And those are a good source of information to feed into to drive where's the areas where the business wants to spend some effort to try and make some improvements. The other aspect of where it can come from is probably the business strategy, where they're looking at what competitors are doing. So if you've got people like, I suppose, the automotive sector, Tesla's come in, they haven't got a lot of the legacy constraints that other businesses have. They're able to then a lot more freely adapt and evolve their business practices and be more efficient. So every company now has got to adapt and improve to become more efficient, to keep up with the competition. So the business strategy is another good lever back into that business improvement initiative. So from there, it's then really a case of trying to prioritize where should the effort be focused to then drive potential improvements back in.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And thank you so much for sharing with me this example of the process reengineering workflow that I actually have up on the screen here and that I'll share with our viewers as well. Can you describe the problem life cycle, as you call it, in a bit more detail for each of these elements?
Right. So what I've pulled together really is, it's quite a generic example of a problem life cycle, starting from a problem's identified, the problem gets triaged. It would then, if it is a real problem, it needs a resolution. The normal practice would be you raise a change request, you do an impact assessment against it, you'll then have some costs, so you'll approve the business impact, and then you'll go and implement the solution and hopefully close the problem off. But I suppose when you do this at the start of an improvement journey, you're looking at that process, and one of the critical things is you bring the right team in to assess the process. So you're not just relying on your business process subject matter experts who'll understand each step of that process inside out, but you've also got to bring in the customers into it as well. So the people who are working with that process day to day, so they're probably the ones that are feeling the pain, or they're feeling pain from the symptoms that's coming out of that process or coming from somewhere else, and the problems are not being fixed. So some of the key things there really is trying to, when you map out the process, breaking down each step and understanding for each step what's the inputs and the outputs of that step, what happens inside that process step, and what tools are used, and what are the constraints potentially on the process. So it could be regulatory information that's required. It could be when you're looking at the process, is this the way we've always done it? Which seems to be a great sort of excuse for lots of things. Or is it legacy tools that are then mandating you have to work a specific way? And then between the process SMEs and the customers, they start to get a real understanding of the root cause of the problems. And in some cases, you might have to dig quite deep in that problem area to actually get to the real root cause. Because I don't know how many improvement initiatives have probably happened worldwide over the years where they go and they try and fix the symptoms and then they wonder why the problem still exists. Or it maybe masks it for a few months, but the problem comes back. So it's trying to sort of break the problem down and the process down to get to the real detail around each step. What's the value add? What's the constraints on it? Process, tools, organization, could be any of those. So that coming out from there, you've got a really good understanding of what are all the pain points around that process and a lot of inputs that will feed into the transformation that you need to make.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I love that you mentioned that sometimes you have to go quite deep to get to the real root of the issue, because whenever we talk about this process at a high level, it can sound so simple, right? Interview your people, find out what the problems are, and go about and fix them. But a lot of times you'll find that just because you thought you had a problem with maybe supplier management, once you go through some of these deeper level processes or use some tools like the 5 whys analysis or what have you, that really wasn't the problem at all. So that's really great. So once you get to that place and you have an idea of what your actual challenge is and how you're going to solve it, and you have a future state vision in mind, how do you go and actually transform from that current state to the future state?
So I think for me, the first step is getting the right vision on that future state. So it's not just a case of, right, we're going to fix all these problems and the world's going to be a happy place. There's a lot more things that can influence that. So you've got to be taking on board what's the business strategies or what's the departmental strategies that need to tie in. So is it that in the case of a problem, we want to improve quality? Issues are costing too much money. So then you want to make sure you've got a robust process in place that ties in to support that business objective. And it's sort of working through from that strategy, what's the potential vision for the process in an unconstrained way? So without having to worry about technology or organization, how should the process initially shape up? Because then once you start to go through the next level detail, you'll start to apply some of those constraints in. And from a technology perspective, you'd be looking at, are you going to continue to use this technology you've already got? So if you've already got a PLM system available and in use, how can you then extend it or adapt it to fill close off some of the issues? Or is it something new where you then need to apply new technology to fix that issue? So there's a lot of things to factor in to build up the future state. There could be organizational changes in there. So it might be, I think the example of the revised process where I sent through was I'd actually added some extra steps in. And part of that was, instead of just looking at a problem as it comes in, is to bring a complete set of problems together so you can triage it in view of contextual information. And you might see this problem keeps happening over and over and over again. So why is it not being resolved? And part of that, once you've triaged it, identified the problem parts or assemblies, then raise the change. And the extra step of adding again is what's the right solution to that problem? Because especially nowadays, products are so much more complex, and it's not just a case of replace a mechanical part. Normally, you replace a part, you've got potentially updates to make the software. There could be some electronics need to be updated. There's potentially multiple solutions to the same problem. So then you've got to define what those potential solutions could be. And then you almost want to do, as part of your impact assessment, a cost benefits analysis against each of those. So you then come out of the end of that process with, we've got a solution to the problem, and we believe we've got the most cost efficient one, and we've got it as a complete solution, so that when you go implement the change, you don't want to then discover at the very last minute when you're testing and qualifying it, oh, I've missed my software updates and I now need to go back through the whole process again. Because I don't know how many times I've seen that happen, where you end up with a partial change to going in because it's only fixing part of the solution, and then you're back to square one again, and then has all the knock-on costs. So it's making sure that when you're digging into the solution steps, you've covered off enough detail to fix each of the issues. And if it's a big complex problem, you're almost building a roadmap of all the activities that you then need to cover off. And making sure the customers are part of that vision should help make the rollout or deployment of the process updates a lot smoother, because they've been part of the solutioneering process.
That's really great advice and great examples as well. I'd like to take it back just for a second here. You mentioned thinking about your problems and your solutions in an unconstrained way. And I really like the idea of that, because a lot of times, even in our own lives, right, like outside of our jobs, whenever we go to fix something, we're already putting limiters on it, right? So it's not, how do I actually fix this once and for all? It's, oh, but I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the this, the current house that we live in doesn't have enough space, whatever the case may be. And it amplifies whenever you have, 30 people in a room trying to fix a process, where each person coming from their area of experience is going to say, well, the technology can't do that, or, well, our suppliers can't do that. So if we remove that idea of can't from our evaluation process, you come up with much more broad ideas and concepts and really solutions to actually solve these problems. How do you get a room full of people to do that?
Quite often you've almost got them locked in, but you try to keep them on point of what would you want the process to be? What would be the ideal? And as you say, the first thing that happens is, I've got PLM system A, it only does it this way. And so you're automatically building constraints in. You've got to try and almost take it right back to the bare bones and, right, what are the process steps you really need to do? Forget, the tools can all be developed to do that capability, depending on the time or money constraints. But it's a case of, what do you really need in there that would make the process as sweet as you can make it? And once you've got that view, then you can start to say, well, how do we fix or implement a solution to this area and this area and this area? And that's where the constraints start to come back in. So you're almost taking it, if it was an onion where you peel it back to get to the root cause of the problem, you're putting all the layers back on again.
Excellent. And going forward, then how would you apply all of this advice up to this point to key considerations for each state of your process?
So I suppose, take a problem lifecycle, you're almost breaking it into 3 distinct phases. So you can manage an implementation that covers the first phase, and you're looking at what's the key information you need to capture, what's the process flow, who needs to be involved, how are they going to do each of those steps. And then once you've got that view of the world, you can then start to apply the technology over it. So how do I configure the technology to do that step? And as part of this, what's the business impact going to be? So how are you then going to have to communicate with not only the customers, but their teams as well, so that they can then adopt the new processes? And you're almost treating it as a typical deployment, where you'll develop some software, and what I really like about the agile approach is you've got the end customer, they're part of the development process, so they're seeing what they're going to get developing, so there's no surprises at the end. And if you break it into bite-sized pieces, then it's something that they're able to cope with and run with straight away and start to get some real benefits. And part of that is the new process documentation, how people are going to be trained, and when you start to deploy it, giving them the right support. And then moving on to the next phase of the process and the next phase. And I suppose a key part is, because you've understood the pain points and what the business impacts are when you're looking at the as-is process, you're then able to prioritize which bits of the process you're going to fix that are going to add most value. So the best thing for senior management is you do an improvement initiative and you start to realize benefits quickly. And then you've got a good argument for, now I need to continue on to the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. So it's getting that prioritization correct, but making sure that you've got enough capability in there to actually deliver some real benefits.
I think that's a key to whatever you're thinking about gradual evolution or, this agile process, because if you don't have well set, functional deliverables for people to test the process against that, covers at least enough of a process, then you're going to have too many missing gaps. And it's really, I think it'll work, but, we've only done so little. How do we plan our agile phases to be wide enough yet small enough to deliver real value without leaving too much out?
Yeah, and I think that's a key point, because if you sit down and try and take engineers through the process, they're great at writing requirements documents for the products, but when it comes to, so how should you be working and getting them to write down a requirements document, the things will be missed out, or things will change from when they actually see a live system at the end. So going through the agile process, you're asking for what's your key capabilities, and then you start to build that capability, and then it's a very safe bet that that once the engineers will start to see the system, lots more ideas will naturally come out, and they'll be looking for, so can I have this, and this, and taking it through the agile process, they get to the end with something that they can really use and they're really bought into, rather than, well, I've only got 30% of what I was really after and being quite disappointed. And they should be getting it a lot quicker as well.
Yep, absolutely. It's a little bit like redesigning a kitchen.
Yeah.
You go in with an idea, and then it starts to break down and then come back together. You're like, maybe I really do need those extra features that I didn't think I wanted to begin with. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian. This has been really great. I love working through these process ideas and hearing your experiences and whatnot. Are there any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd like to share today?
But the one, and it comes back to freeing all the constraints from the process. During that implementation, one of the things that I put forward was quite a radical change to the part creation and release process. So that had always been a long, painful process. And I think it probably is in a lot of organizations as well, where lots of people are involved. And when we sort of drew out the process, we did challenge a lot of areas. And we had probably 3 or 4 attempts at this. We challenged from each step, does it add value? If you break down the part types, what value does this type add, and everything else? So we proposed almost cutting the process in half, and we thought we could get probably 40% savings out of the changes to the process, which everybody thought, well, that's really good, but there was a lot of skeptics as part of this. So as we were going through that development process, because it was agile, people could then start to see how the process was shaping up. And the key stakeholders in there, who were really supply chain and manufacturing, said, right, we'll give this a go, but we're still a bit cautious. with what we found after the first 12 months, I think the savings were probably in excess of 50%.
Wow, that's great.
It was having an unconstrained view of the world, taking out all the waste and everything else, and then can you make it work? And that was sort of going through. It shows that a lot of these practices can and do work.
That's really incredible. I love that story, and hail to the skeptics out there. They make us do our best work, right? So again, thank you so much, Brian, for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to bringing you back so we can talk more about connecting data and moving towards a more structured process, and of course, what everybody loves, the digital twin and those service feedback loops. So
that'll be good.
Excellent. See you again in 2021. And to all of our viewers, thanks for joining us. Like this content, remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons to be alerted to future content so you'll never miss another episode. Have a question that you'd like to see answered? Please drop us a line in the comments below, or just send me an email at jmo@minerva-plm.com. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.